back. Today we're going to be taking a look at the vegetable garden that we planted about 6 weeks ago. It doesn't seem to be growing as fast as it should be, or at least in comparison to others I've seen around here in the rural countryside. We didn't have too many expectations this year for it. We had simply plowed over some sod, used the cultivator a bit to break up some soil, made some rough rows, put in some corn and some carrots, beets, some cabbage, brussel sprouts, and kind of hope for the best. But what's interesting right now is I can see that it's not growing at a good rate. So what I'd like to do today is walk through taking a soil sample, see what the soil has or doesn't have, and kind of start to make plans for what we might do in the fall or early spring to add some nutrients back, because it definitely looks like it's short on something. So if you guys have any comments you'd like to make or any similar experiences, we'd love to hear from you. Any suggestions would be much appreciated. So let's get to it. I'll give you a show of the garden here first before we get started on testing our soil. So there's a look at the potatoes. And just panning over here, there's beets kind of in the middle there by the pie plate. And there's a bit of corn growing right over there. As you can see, for the end of July, this is it's behind as far as gardens go. So with the test kit that I have, the instructions say to take samples from various parts of the garden, I guess to get more broader range, but for the size of this garden and what we're trying to accomplish, I'm going to take one sample about dead center of the garden here. They say for vegetable crops you should be going down at least 4 inches, so let's dig right here. We'll take a sample, throw it on this old plate I've got here, and we'll bring it inside and start to give it a test. So we're back inside. We've got our soil test kit and our sample ready to go. This is a test kit from Environmental Concepts. You can find them at lusterleaf.com. I'm not affiliated. My wife found us this one on Amazon, so we'll give it a try, see what's inside. So I've had this open before. This isn't an unboxing video. Those are some of the filter papers, some replacement O-rings for the plunger assembly, and some instructions. The instructions are pretty good. I've had a look at them. So let's get started. Opening it up, our first test here is going to be for our pH, and it looks like we're going to be doing a color comparison, kind of like litmus paper, if you're familiar with that. This one here uses a pH test solution to do it. So that'll be our first test. Then the next test will be for nitrogen, and which of course is just a color comparison. Phosphorus test, another color comparison, and then potassium, which is kind of a clarity test. The way this test works is that there's 2 solutions for potassium, as we'll see, and the way of doing the test is to determine the level of cloudiness in the solution once you've drawn it from the soil. And on the back, it goes into discussion on how to raise and lower your pH of your soil, how to make adjustments, different types of soil, and fertilizer recommendations prior to planting. Some other great tips in here. The one I kind of found interesting was a pH preference list. I know the print is small, you won't be able to see that, I don't believe, but it goes into flowers, trees and shrubs, vegetables and herbs, fruits, house and garden plants, and ornamental grasses, and it gives a kind of a scale of preference of pH level that those different plants, vegetables, trees, so forth prefer. So their scales will be usually within 1 to 2, it looks like, for different pH levels. So raspberry, for example, 5 to a 7.5, that sort of thing. So once you do the test, if you're growing any of these here, you can have a look and see where it falls within that chart to see if your pH is too high or too low for what you're trying to grow. So we've got the soil sample. Let's get things started. I'm just going to set this kind of over here to the side a bit. They say you shouldn't touch your soil sample with your hands, just to avoid, I guess, contaminating it and making a false reading. But I think I've already touched it a little bit now. But we'll put these on just to say we did, I guess. So there's a few tools within the kit. A little spoon for scooping up samples, as well as some of the powdered chemicals that are in here that are used to perform the various tests. We have a pH solution test, the nitrate extraction solution, phosphorus extraction solution, potassium extractant, and a potassium reactant. Those will be the 4 test tubes for the four tests, and that's pretty much it. So let's follow along the instructions and see what we've got here. So the first test is going to be for our pH. We'll get one of our test tubes out here. Take our cap off. And the first part of this is going to be to put our soil sample in the test tube. I'm not sure how well you can see that. Might be a bit of a glare on it. But these little plastic test tubes are graduated in milliliters from 1 to 5. So we'll use our small spoon here, and we'll bring over our soil sample, and we'll get 1 milliliter. There we go, about 1 milliliter. It's a little bit higher. My soil's a little clumpy. We'll call that even. So the next step with this is going to be to add the pH test solution to the 2.5 milliliter mark. So this is our pH test solution right here. Looks like it has its own greenish, dark green color to it. So yeah, that's definitely a green color. So we'll fill this up to the 2.5 milliliter mark. There we are. So kind of a green clearish color on the top. And we cap this, and we're going to shake it thoroughly, and then we'll let it set. There's one other thing we needed to add to this, and it won't hurt if we do it now. I forgot to add this powder, the barium sulfate powder. So this is what they classify as a testing reagent. Now, 1 spoon is what we're going to add to this. That should be 1 spoon. Now they do mention if your solution is not coming clear, then you can add a bit more. So I'll add a little bit extra because it's kind of hard to measure with that little spoon. Sorry you didn't get to see that there, but that's the barium powder. For this test here, I don't think the order that I do it in is going to change anything, so shake that up just to dissolve the soil into the solution, or at least mix it in best we can. And we're going to let that one sit. So once the pH test is done, we're going to start on the nitrogen and the other tests. We'll have a little look at the instruction here. So for the nitrogen, phosphorus, and the potassium test, we have to prepare our filtering device. So they give us in the kit this plunger and barrel assembly. It's kind of like a syringe, but it kind of works in reverse. The plunger, which is this portion here, is pushed down into the sample and the solution in here. And the filter paper, you can see the little holes in the end there, I'm hoping. There they are. The filter paper will allow the liquid to pass up into here where the sample is collected, after it's been mixed with the soil. So we're extracting what we need to see out of the soil to see what's in it. So we've got this off and this off. We're going to get one of our filter papers here to get started. Filter paper is placed in the end over those little holes that we saw in the plunger. We'll wipe that off, our rag here. And then we're just going to push the filter paper down in just to seat that in the plunger. So there we go, we've got that in place. We're going to start with another 1 milliliter sample into the barrel assembly here. Might be hard to see. That is graduated as well. So we'll fill this up to the 1 milliliter mark. We'll give a little bit extra this time just because, like I mentioned earlier, the sample isn't a fine powder. So, you know, close enough, right? And a little bit more should do it. Okay, so there's 1 milliliter in the barrel assembly. There's our soil in here. We're going to now add the appropriate test solution. So we add the N1 nitrate extraction solution. This is it here, up to the 2.5 milliliter mark. There's 2, 2.5. Now we're going to insert the plunger that we added our paper filter to just inside the edge of the barrel and gently shake for 30 seconds is what they say. Now we'll give that a good shake so that we can get the solution, all the soil into the solution with none of it caking on the bottom. There we go, that should be pretty close to 30 seconds. It looks like it's actually dissolved in there quite well. So now we'll push the plunger down. The instructions tell us to press the plunger down slowly until it just touches the soil test solution in the barrel. So hopefully you can see that. The plunger is just ahead of the black ring. So there we go, we've just touched it. Now we're going to put the cap on, this part here, and thread it down. This is of course going to further compress the plunger. And we'll thread it down slowly until we see the solution come up into here. I think you should be able to see that. There we go, it should start coming up now. So I've tried this before just to give it a test with some other soil I had. It actually wasn't here at the garden. And what I did discover is that the instructions tell you to shake this gently. And the reason why they do, and this is actually quite hard to kind of master, the reason for that is that if you shake it too hard, the filter paper gets clogged and you can't get the plunger down any further. So the filter paper fell off, and if you look at it, I think you can see that there, it's completely plugged. So let's start again with a new filter paper on that one. We have lots, so we'll just put another one on, go from there. Tuck that one in there, push it down like we did before. There we go, our filter paper is in. So now that that's settled down a bit, push it down to the top of the solution. Now we'll put this on. We should see this tighten in pretty good. So keep watching here, you'll see the solution come up in it. There's a little bit there already. There we go, it's tightening down really good. There's a bit of air in there. So all we need from that is 1 milliliter that we're going to put into one of our other test tubes here. So we'll back off the cap. Just following along with our instructions here. So what we're going to add now, first we'll get our test tube out. Get our cap off. We're going to put in 1 milliliter of the solution that we extracted into the test tube. Did we get it? Almost. There we go. That should be 1 milliliter. And the next thing we're going to add is what's called the N2 powder. This is the reactant for this test, and our instructions say to add 1 level spoonful of this powder. We'll do our best to get a level spoonful with this little spoon we have. Say that's pretty close. And we'll place that in there and shake for 10 seconds. Now this is the test that we're looking for a color change within the pink to, I guess it would be a dark burgundy color. So we've got that in there. Gently shake it for 10 seconds. There we go. So there's 10 seconds. And we're going to let that stand for 5 minutes. So we'll set that aside. And we'll begin our next test. So the nitrogen test, here's the results. So with our darkest color showing a surplus, next down would be sufficient, adequate, deficient, and the last one would be no or depleted. So hopefully we're in here, but we'll see. So the next test is going to be a phosphorus test. So the phosphorus test as well as the potassium test both start off the same as our nitrogen test. We're going to use different solutions and so forth. But we're going to, we'll have to start by cleaning this out. So I'm going to rinse this in a bit of water and I'll be right back. So we have the barrel and the plunger rinsed out, filter papers off of this, and we'll start the phosphorus test. Phosphorus test very similar to nitrogen test, however we're only going to add a 1/2 milliliter of soil sample this time. So we'll get our soil sample in here. So we have a half milliliter of the sample, and now we're going to add our P1, which is the extract solution right here, and we're going to add this up to the 2 milliliter mark. So there we go, up to the 2 milliliter mark. Same as before, we'll get out one of our filter discs here. Just like before, the plunger is going to go in just to the top, and we're going to shake this gently. I'm going to try not to get the soil up onto the top of the filter paper. I think that's what happened last time. of course is very difficult if you're trying to mix that solution. It's just hard to get it down in there. So you know what? Let's use the spoon. It's not going to cause any changes. In fact, it's probably easier. There we go. Now we're going to push that down. We can hear the air coming out to the top of the solution. We'll put our threaded cap on like before. And once again, we're going to expect to see the sample come through in this area right here. There we go. It'll start coming up now. There's our sample in here, and our soil is compressed down in the bottom. We'll get out our second test tube for the phosphorus test. Now, we're going to need our spoon once again. And we're going to need to add a half, let's see what we've got here, a half level teaspoon of the P2 phosphorus reactant powder. Hopefully you can see that. Now a half level teaspoon is going to be a little tricky, or sorry, not teaspoon, a half level spoon. This is the spoon. It's pretty small. I'm just going to dry that off so we don't have any problems with the powder sticking. Do my best to get a half level spoon. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty close. So we're going to put this into here, just like before. Just taking the cap off our sampling here. And we're going to add this up to the 1 ml mark. So we only need 1 milliliter to sample with. And there we have it. 1 milliliter. We have our powder in there. We're going to cap this, shake gently for 5 seconds, uncap it, and take the color reading next to the chart. So this one here apparently reacts pretty quickly. Let's get this guy covered up. So here's the colors that we're looking for. Give that a shake. Have a look here. Say we're in the depleted range, and this test here, there's no wait time with this. That's what we're showing. I'm wondering if I shouldn't test that again. You know what? Let's do this again, just for fun, just to make sure we got this right. So how about I rinse this out, come back, and we'll try it again. And we'll compare it against the chart. So the instruction they give us is to uncap it. Look down through the solution. Let's see if you can see this. To look down through the solution. Compare the color. And once again, we are showing a depleted. Yeah, certainly depleted. Well, that's some interesting information. I'll be right back. I'm just going to rinse out the barrel, put a new filter paper in, and then we'll start on the potassium test. So the potassium test, pretty similar to the other tests. We'll first collect our sample. For this test here, they're asking us for a 1/2 ml sample of soil. So there's our 1/2 ml sample. The next step with this one here is we're going to add the K1 potassium extraction solution, this one here, to our soil sample up to the 2 milliliter mark. There we go. Same as before. You can see it, soil settled on the bottom. We'll just give it a little stir. There it comes. We'll insert the plunger. Thread the cap on the barrel. Grab our next test tube. So we're going to need 1 milliliter of the solution, and we're going to add a 1/2 milliliter of the K2 solution, which I'll show you in a second here. I find it helps to just tighten it, loosen it, tighten it, loosen it. If you're having a hard time with your soil conditions, just go slower with it and it will extract what you need. Okay, I'll take the cap off. We're looking for 1 milliliter again in this test tube. There's 1 milliliter. Set that aside for now. We're going to add a 1/2 milliliter of the K2 solution, which is here, and we'll let that stand for 5 minutes before we take a reading. So this test here, if you remember when I started, we're going to be gauging the cloudiness against the chart over here. See if I can bring that into view for you. So here being a surplus going down to depleted. Once again, it's a visual test down through the test tube, or close comparison side on. So we're going to add a 1/2 milliliter of our K2 now. So with our solution added, the reactant solution, there are no instructions provided, or nowhere in the instructions provided does it say to shake this. It says to let it stand for 5 minutes before we take a reading. So let's set that over here. We'll give that some time, and then we'll come back to that afterwards here. But in the meantime, while we wait, let's take a look back on our other samples and where we ended up. So if you remember correctly, our first test was for pH, and we have it here. It's kind of tricky to tell, but if you look, I'll use the spoon, see if I can show you with the spoon. If we look here on the bottom, we can see kind of where the solids are. There's a foamy bit on the top, and in the middle is kind of where we want to see the color right in here to be able to judge the pH. That's really tricky to compare, but I would say we're somewhere between acidic at 6 and 5.5, maybe slightly acidic. I can't lay it down or it's going to change the it's going to mix it up again, and that's not what we want. Try and go down through the colors, mainly looking here in this area. We may have mixed it up too much for comparison now, but it's somewhere within here between a pH of 6.5, with 6.5 being slightly acidic and 6 being acidic. I'd say we're in here. The nitrogen test, there's no indication of trying to set this next to the sample, but let's see what we can do. We're looking for similar color. I would say we're on the depleted side for nitrogen. Let's try this just for fun. We'll try to look down through. Yeah, it's definitely, without looking at the sediment on the bottom, which is hard to do as I tip it, that's definitely depleted. Try and look at it on a white background. I don't know how close I can get that for you. You can see it moving around, just the sediment moving, but the liquid itself should be within one of these colors, and I would say we're depleted. And that's fine, it really is. That tells us why that garden's not doing anything right at the moment. So the other test that we did, that was our phosphorus test to, if you remember, we had to look at this one, shake gently 5 seconds and then look immediately for the color reading. And at that time I said we were in the depleted area. Well, that hasn't changed. If I can hold this up for you. Try and hold that against the white background. You can see the greenish tinge to that. It's definitely not deficient, it's depleted. We'll go back to our last test, which was potassium, and this one was a clarity test, essentially. Just to gauge, it's done by the cloudiness of the solution. So our instruction says, place the test tube in the circle printed under the black and dotted rectangles. Place on the high reading first, which would be here, and move down the chart until one of the boxes is just visible. That box is your reading. Well, I don't know. I can't read anything through that. But maybe I have a surplus? I would have to say yes, that there is a surplus of potassium. As I can't see if you can see through it. Very difficult to line that up for you, but as we go down through, I'm not sure. If any of you guys have used one of these test kits, I'd really appreciate the feedback. Just leave me a comment. Let me know if I missed something completely. Is my soil this bad? What do we need to do? I'm looking at probably adding quite a bit of, well, not quite a bit, but some manure to the soil come fall. I'd like to be able to till it under, have it ready to go for spring. We don't have any compost on the go right now, so we're not really sure. Or sorry, won't be able to add any of that right at the moment, but some composted manure, after that. I don't want to go out and buy bag upon bag of fertilizer. I don't think I need to do that just yet. But no, I'd really appreciate from anybody out there who's used this kit or a similar kit, and what were your results like? Did you have to try tests a couple of times? Did you goat your own results? Because I certainly have. As I showed you before, the pictures of the garden, it isn't a barren wasteland. It is doing something, but the results don't show very well for what's there in the soil. To me right now, it hasn't got anything other than maybe a surplus of potassium, but I'm really not sure if that result is a surplus or not. But if I can't see through it on a surplus, it's too cloudy. I guess it's off the scale. Is that what that means? I'm not really sure. I hope you've made it this far, and once again, thanks for stopping by and having a watch. And as I said, if any of you have any comments or you'd like to see more, subscribe, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks a lot now. Take care.